Hi, boys and girls. Welcome to today's lesson. We are getting ready to start our next story or text in My Perspectives, and it is Brown Girl Dreaming, which is located on page 13 of your text. So I would like you to get your My Perspectives book in front of you and open up to pages 12 and 13. If you need to pause the video, please do so because I'm going to have you write some stuff in your book. So with this lesson, the first thing I want to point out is that in the upper right-hand corner of page 13, it states anchor text and then memoir in verse. This is very important because memoir is a specific kind of writing, as is verse. So the purpose of the lesson today is to understand those two pieces of information. So first, what is a memoir? A memoir is a narrative written about an important event in an author's life that affected them in some way. On page 12 or 13, somewhere in any of the open space that you have, I would like you to write this information that's in the gray box here. A memoir is a narrative written about an important event in the author's life that affected them in some way. You can pause the video to give you time to write and then start playing it again when you are done. Now, the reason we're going to ask you to write information in your book like this from time to time is because when we do unit tests, they're going to be open book. So you can go back and look up this information specifically for a test. Okay, so let's talk about the characteristics of a memoir. A memoir is a memory, a description of a true past event from the author's life. And if you look at the word memoir, it starts the same as memory, M-E-M, mem. It's a memory is what a memoir is. And it's typically written in first person. And if you remember from a few lessons ago, we did talk about first person, where the author uses words such as I, me, my, we. Now, if you look at the beginning two letters of memoir, you will see the words me. So this is a memory about me as the author that I write in a memoir. Now, because it's a memory from the author's life, they will reveal feelings that they had during that time. And it's also going to show what the author may have learned from that experience. A memoir is more about the author's experience from that event, more so than just the event itself. Now, what does a memoir look like? First, a memoir is a story, so they should look like any other narrative written from a first-person point of view. Memoirs typically are written in paragraphs, and there's no rule on how many paragraphs a memoir should have. That's completely up to you as a writer. But the goal of a memoir is to clearly show an important event or experience and explain how it changed you. And then finally, the ending of a memoir must include an explanation that shows how this experience changed or affected you as the author in some important way. Now, this memoir from Brown Girl Dreaming by Jacqueline Woodson is very unique because it's written in verse. So let's look at what verse is. So we are going to compare something called prose and verse. So first, prose is the spoken or written language in ordinary form. It is how we normally talk or write, whereas verse is the writing arranged with a metrical rhythm, typically having a rhyme. Prose does not pay attention to rhyme or rhythm. whereas verse pays attention to rhyme and rhythm. That's where you're going to have the ending of every other line will rhyme, or there's going to be a certain number of syllables per line. Next, prose are ideas written in sentences, and sentences are grouped into paragraphs. So prose is paragraphs, whereas verse is for poetry. So those lines are written as stanzas. So verse is written in stanzas. Prose is written in natural and normal grammatical language, whereas verse is written in figurative and rhythmical language. That's where those things that we learned a few lessons ago come into play. The onomatopoeia, the alliteration, personification, all of those things come out more in poetry and verse. So right now, what I want you to do is I want you to write the word prose on page 12 or 13 and put a dash or a line after it. And I also want you to write the word verse and put a dash or a line after it. And the big takeaway here is that prose is written in paragraphs. So I would like you to put that next to prose, whereas verse is written in stanzas. So prose is paragraphs, verse is stanza, and you're writing those either on page 12 or 13. So now I want you to look at page 21 of your My Perspective book. This is where they talk about analyzing craft and structure, which is a major standard that is worked on in ELA, probably now for the rest of your school career. And they talk specifically about memoir and poetry, and it's because From Brown Girl Dreaming is a memoir written in verse, which is poetry. So in a memoir, an author tells a true story of an important time in his or her life. Most memoirs are written in first-person point of view, or from the author's perspective. This is where we hear the I, me, my. The author tells what happened and what he or she thought and felt about it. Memoirs are usually written in prose. Again, that's complete sentences and paragraphs. And most also use dialogue to show how people speak and what they're like. But in this memoir by Jacqueline Woodson, it takes a different approach. Instead of prose, she tells a series of stories in poems that are written in stanzas. She does not have complete sentences. Rather, she breaks these sentences up into separate lines, which then means she breaks some language rules that we have. And one of the examples is that Woodson sometimes uses sentence fragments and non-standard capitalizations, where she will not capitalize a word that should be capitalized. And Woodson's choice to tell her story through poems affects how you as a reader understand it. This allows Woodson to emphasize certain words and phrases and ideas. She also uses storytelling elements such as dialogue, and this is where a conversation is happening between two people. Two people are talking, or more than two people are talking. This combination of poetry and storytelling helps Woodson immerse you as the reader more deeply into her childhood world. Again, a memoir is where an author tells a true story of an important time in his or her life. You should have this written somewhere on page 12 or 13. And that verse means stanzas. It's written as poetry. So let's meet the author. Here's a picture of Jacqueline Woodson. Now, she was born in 1964 in Columbus, Ohio, and she recalls being happiest as a child when she was writing. I wrote on paper bags and my shoes and denim binders. A 2008 Newbery Honor winner, Woodson believes that writers need to be honest and to listen to the voices of young people. Now I would like you to go back to page 12 in your My Perspective book. This is our vocabulary that we're going to be focusing on for this text. And you're going to come across these words. The first word is squish, followed by humming, twist, twirl, shushes, and feathery. Now, before you read, I want you to rank your understanding of these words. So you're going to put a 1 next to your most familiar word and then a 6 next to your least familiar word. So you will be using the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And each one will have its own number. So the one that you are the most familiar with will get a 1 in this column. The word that you're least familiar with, you're going to put a 6 in this column. Again, you're going to rank from 1 to 6. And you're going to put your ranking in the second column. And again, you're using the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Now, let's look at one of your first assignments that goes along with this lesson. And this is our vocabulary worksheet. And those 6 vocabulary words that we just talked about are on this page. So on this sheet, we have our words squish, humming, twist, twirl, shushes, and feathery. And for each of the following items, I want you to think about the meaning of the italicized word and then answer the question. You're not writing the definition of the word. You're explaining if this is a true or false statement and how you know. For example, Juan felt the squish of moss beneath his feet as he walked through the forest. Was the ground beneath Juan's feet hard and brittle? So you have to kind of know what the word squish means. And here, squish would not be hard and brittle. So you would write no, because squish means the ground is soft. And that's what you could leave as your answer. So then you're going to go through and answer the rest of them in the same manner. Then you will also have memoir and poetry worksheets. So here you have one worksheet. It is 2 pages long, or 3 actually it says. And again, on the top of the page you get information explaining what a memoir is and what verse is. And then you're going to go through and you're going to read these. In this first section, you're going to read the poem by Robert Frost, After Apple Picking. Once you're done reading the poem, you want to answer the questions below. So the first question is, what is the point of view in this poem and how can you tell? So this is where you have to think about first person, second person, third person. And then you're going to go on and you're going to answer the rest of those questions. On the second page, you're going to have The Exposed Nest, another poem by Robert Frost. And afterward, you're going again to answer the question. First one is, what is the point of view of this passage? Is it the author's point of view? Is it another person's point of view? Is it first person, second person? What is the speaker describing? You're just going to type your answers after each question on the line. Once you have finished those 3 worksheets, go back to our Google Classroom and submit them for a grade.